Gomez the Raigadi and Kedvis Gonoella, the Inland Fisheries Heritage Licence Bill 2017 first stage. Can I call on Deputy Martin Ferris or Martin Kenny? Martin Ferris, you're sharing time. Okay.
Over the last number of years, we've all are well acquainted with the situation in rural Ireland, and in particular with our coastal communities. And our coastal communities are suffering terrible, but even greater suffering is our island communities. The island communities have survived traditionally a way of life through fishing and farming, and much of their fishery included drift netting for salmon, potting for crayfish and lobster, some trawling, gill netting for various species, and also you had fishing for pollock, sport dog and bass. Now, in recent years, in particular with the Common Fisheries Policy, the track record of people involved in trawling determined people's quota. And because the island communities were detached from that, they receive little or any quota, only some in the whitefish sector. Also, there is a European ban on sport dog, despite the fact that many fishermen that you would talk to in our coastal communities and in our island communities would tell you there's an abundance there. They're no longer allowed to fish bass, even though fishing trawlers and boats from other EU countries are allowed to. And probably the biggest hit of all was the banning of the drift net for salmon. Fishing and farming was a way of life in our coastal communities, and it's managed to survive in a sustainable way. Before we prepared this bill, both Deputy Kinney and myself met with, and Pierce Doherty as well, we met with the the island communities in relation to this. And it's in conjunction with them that this bill has come forward. What we need to see is a sustainable way of life, and by doing that we believe that the Irish Fisheries Heritage Bill is one way in helping to bring that about. So I would ask that the House here support this bill, because it will go some way in addressing the terrible imbalance regarding our island communities, our coastal communities and the rest of the country.
Kenny, yeah.
Thank you, Controller. The Inland Fisheries Heritage Licence Bill is really about ensuring that people who live on the islands can have a future, that they can have a way of life that they have had for centuries, that can be maintained and that it's a right that can be facilitated. Now, the problem we have at the moment, as Deputy Ferris outlined, is that the situation with the Common Fisheries Policy has put them into a situation where many of these small fishermen living on our islands are not able to have a living. And that is most unfortunate. And working with the Irish Island Marine Resource Organisation, IMRO, we developed this particular heritage licence scenario. The bill is designed for people who live on the islands and want to make a living from fishing to continue doing that. The bill will try and allocate a portion of the quota to the island fishermen. In order to do that, this bill is really facilitating the island fishermen to have a future, to facilitate the continuance of traditional fishing practices on our offshore islands. It provides that the issuing of the licence to the island fishermen will be defined to people, that island fishermen will be defined to people who are habitually resident on one of Ireland's offshore islands and who are engaged in small-scale coastal fishing to earn a livelihood. Small-scale coastal fishing is then defined as fishing from a vessel of less than 12 metres in length and not using towed fishing gear. Now, we're putting restrictions of that nature into this to ensure that it can't be expanded to anyone else, that this licence isn't something that can be traded or sold off or moved on to other people, as has happened in the past, that it will be non-transferable and that it will be enforced when the holder of the licence is only on board the vessel. So, in other words, that several people, or the one person can't have several boats, that the holder of the licence must be on board the vessel. That's to ensure that really it's about the small fisherman on the island having a future. The enactment of the bill will, as I say, involve a small transferable community island quota which will be put in place and which can be done and has been done in other jurisdictions in the EU. Really, a lot of this and a lot of the work that went into this is to be credited to the island fishermen themselves, who came to us looking to get some solution to their problem. It's an attempt to try and come to a solution to it, and we'd appreciate the support of the government in regard to this. I know the people living on the islands are continually in a situation where they feel that they are disadvantaged, not only from their geography, but from the fact that the traditional way of life that they have had and a way of making a living is being eroded through legislation which has been brought in, most of it from Brussels, and has been acted in the way that they try and carry out their livelihood on the island. So it's an appeal to the government to ensure that we get support for this bill. Thank you.
Deputy Kenny, is the bill being opposed? It's not being opposed. Motion for leave to introduce is therefore agreed. I would ask the Deputy to move that the
I move the motion.
be taken in private members'
Move
time.
the bill.
Is that agreed? It's agreed.